Imagine this. You stand at the precipice of a decision, not one of minor consequence, but one that feels chiseled from the very bedrock of your being. It's a choice that demands authenticity, yet every fiber of your conditioned self recoils. You've been told, explicitly and implicitly, that to be good is to be selfless, to compromise, to yield. You've internalized the gentle nudges, the societal smiles for conformity, the subtle shaming for ambition that dares to burn too brightly. You've been taught to seek external validation as if it were the very air you breathe, believing that the chorus of approval defines your worth. But what if that entire architecture of belief is a gilded cage? What if the path to true power, not merely influence, but the power to sculpt your own existence, begins precisely where that conditioning breaks, where you find yourself, stark and unadorned, confronting the raw, undeniable truth of your own desires? This isn't about some cartoonish villainy or a Machiavellian hunger for dominion over others. No, this is far more insidious, far more personal. It's about the quiet, internal coup you must stage to reclaim sovereignty over your own mind, your own will, your own narrative. You look around and see a world teeming with individuals who, in their desperate pursuit of acceptance, have become echoes rather than voices. They parrot opinions, chase trends, and construct identities curated for the gaze of others. They are performers on a stage they didn't build, reciting lines they didn't write, all while a deeper, more primal self, the authentic, untamed you, whispers from the shadows, growing increasingly restless. Have you ever felt that gnawing dissonance? That sense of a deep, unarticulated self struggling against the well-behaved persona you present to the world? It's a feeling that manifests as a vague unease, a persistent sense of being slightly off-kilter, like an instrument tuned to the wrong frequency. This isn't just existential angst. It's the quiet rebellion of your true nature, starved of expression. It's the moment you realize that the most profound betrayal isn't an act committed against another, but the slow, agonizing surrender of self, piece by piece, to the expectations of a world that often demands you shrink to fit. Consider the paradox. We are urged to be ourselves, yet every social structure, from education to media, implicitly trains us to be acceptable selves, versions palatable, predictable, and easily categorized. We are told to find our voice, but only if that voice sings in harmony with the dominant chorus. What happens when your true voice is a cacophony, a roar, a whisper that challenges the very foundations of that harmony? Do you silence it? Do you tame it? Or do you, at long last, recognize that the deepest act of self-love, and perhaps the most profoundly powerful act, is to unleash it? Consequences be damned. This is not a call to egoism, but to integrity. It's an urgent question about where the boundaries of yourself truly lie, and whether you have allowed them to be defined by external forces. When you strip away the layers of approval-seeking, fear of judgment, and the desperate need to belong, who remains? What desires surge forth? What ambitions, long suppressed, demand their due? And are you brave enough to acknowledge them, to understand them, and to strategically, almost surgically, carve a path for them in a world that often resists individuality? The journey we are about to embark upon is not for the faint of heart. It will challenge your most cherished assumptions about morality, success, and even the very nature of human interaction. It will force you to look into the shadowed corners of your own psyche and confront the uncomfortable truth that genuine power, the power to manifest your authentic self, often requires a radical re-evaluation of what it means to be good versus what it means to be truly effective. The ultimate question is this: how much of yourself have you already sacrificed on the altar of others' expectations? And what unsung, unacknowledged power lies dormant within you, waiting for the moment you dare to claim it? This is where the true understanding of Machiavelli, not as a doctrine of malevolence, but as a lens for self-mastery, begins. When you find yourself. It's time to dig deeper. to uncover the hidden mechanisms that keep us tethered, and to discover the audacious freedom that awaits beyond them. Now, let's peel back the layers to reveal the hidden problem and its insidious roots. This profound dissonance you feel, this internal schism, is not a personal failing or a unique neurosis. It is the result of a meticulously crafted, deeply embedded psychological and philosophical architecture, the architecture of your own confinement. To understand why we so readily sacrifice the authentic self, we must look not to overt, visible chains, but to the invisible currents of history, psychology, and social conditioning that have shaped the very water we swim in. The problem is not that you are weak. It is that the system designed to domesticate you is ancient, powerful, and extraordinarily subtle. Its roots run back to our most primal instinct: survival. For millennia, belonging to the tribe was not a matter of social comfort. It was the line between life and death. To be ostracized was a death sentence. This ancient fear is a ghost in our machine, a neurological echo that still hums beneath the surface of our modern lives. The disapproving glance of a stranger, the risk of being misunderstood, the terror of public failure, these are not trivial anxieties. They trigger a deep ancestral alarm system that screams, conform, fit in, do not threaten the group, or you will be cast out into the wilderness alone. You are not consciously afraid of being left to the wolves, but your nervous system remembers. Thus, you learn to sand down your sharp edges, to moderate your ambitions, and to present a version of yourself that is optimized for acceptance. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung gave this optimized version a name: the persona. It is the mask you present to the world, a carefully curated composite of agreeable traits. It is the good employee, the loving partner, the responsible citizen. The persona is not inherently malicious. It is a necessary tool for social navigation. The danger arises when you forget you are wearing it. The danger is in the merger, when the mask fuses to your skin and you mistake its placid, accommodating features for your own true face. But what of the parts of you that don't fit the mask? The raw ambition, the righteous anger, the unconventional desires, the hunger for significance that feels too selfish to admit. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow is the repository of every part of yourself you have been taught to disown. Society, in its quest for stability, gives you a clear script. Humility is a virtue, aggression is a sin, self-interest is ugly. So you repress these traits, pushing them down into the dark, unlit basement of your psyche. But the shadow is not destroyed. It festers. It grows more potent in its exile, influencing your behavior in ways you cannot comprehend. It becomes the source of that gnawing dissonance, the inexplicable self-sabotage, the sudden bursts of resentment. It is the voice of your abandoned self, banging on the cellar door. Friedrich Nietzsche diagnosed this condition with brutal clarity. He saw this societal taming process as the triumph of herd morality. The herd, he argued, fears the exceptional individual, the one who is strong, self-directed, and creates their own values. To neutralize this threat, the herd inverts morality itself. It rebrands its own weaknesses as virtues. Meekness becomes goodness, submission becomes obedience, and the inability to exact revenge becomes forgiveness. It champions a morality of pity and self-sacrifice precisely because these traits serve the collective and defang the powerful. You are taught to feel guilty for your own strength, to be ashamed of your will to power, which Nietzsche saw not as a desire to dominate others, but as the fundamental drive to grow, to overcome, and to achieve your fullest potential. You have been conditioned to see your own authentic life force as a sin. This leads us to the terrifying freedom described by existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre declared that we are condemned to be free. There is no preordained purpose, no universal rule book. We are thrust into existence and are solely responsible for creating our own essence through our choices. This is a monumental burden. The weight of total freedom, of total responsibility, is so crushing that we flee from it. We escape into what Sartre called bad faith. We pretend we are not free. We tell ourselves, I have no choice, this is just my role, or I must do this because it's what's expected of me. We act as if we are objects, a waiter defined only by his function, an employee defined only by her job description, rather than radical, free subjects. We willingly trade the terrifying expanse of authentic selfhood for the comfortable, predefined confines of a social role. This is the hidden problem in its entirety. A perfect prison where evolutionary fear provides the foundation, herd morality draws the blueprints, and our own flight from freedom convinces us to lock the door from the inside. Society doesn't need whips and chains when it can offer the warm, soothing comforts of acceptance. As Aldous Huxley warned in Brave New World, the most effective tyrannies are not those that inflict pain, but those that manage to make us love our servitude. We are not oppressed by an iron fist, but seduced by a gentle hand that strokes our hair as it guides us into a gilded cage. This internal mechanism of self-suppression is far more than a source of vague unhappiness. It is a silent force that actively shapes your reality, truncating your possibilities and steering you toward a life of quiet desperation. Its consequences are not just psychological. They are tangible, and they are everywhere. The consequences of this self-abandonment are not dramatic, seismic events. They are a slow erosion, a quiet poisoning that seeps into every corner of your existence. You don't wake up one day to find your life in ruins. You wake up one day to find that the life you are living is not, and has never been, your own. It is a meticulously constructed replica, and you are merely its caretaker. This is the ultimate unseen cost. You become a stranger in your own story. It begins with your decisions. Without a strong internal core of authentic desire, you have no true compass. Your decision-making process becomes an exercise in external calculus. You don't ask, what do I truly want? But rather, what is the safest option? What will others approve of? What path offers the most validation with the least risk of judgment? You choose a career not for its resonance with your soul, but for its prestige in the eyes of others. You enter relationships not because of a deep, elemental connection, but because the person fits a socially acceptable template. Your life path is no longer a journey of discovery, but a careful navigation of a pre-drawn map created by a cartographer who has never met you. The result is a persistent, low-grade regret, the ghost of the life you might have lived, a life that whispers to you in the quiet hours of the night. Professionally, this leads to the gilded cage of the imposter syndrome. When your success is built upon the performance of your persona, each achievement brings not fulfillment, but a spike of terror. You are applauded for a mask, and with every round of applause, the fear intensifies that someday someone will see the fraud behind it. You feel like a spy in your own career, perpetually anxious, unable to internalize your own accomplishments because you know, deep down, that they belong to the character you play, not to you. Your ambition, instead of being a driving force of creation, becomes a source of dread. In your personal life, the effects are even more corrosive. Lacking a defined sense of self, you become dangerously malleable. Your boundaries are permeable, your identity a fluid thing that contorts to please others. This makes you a beacon for those who seek to control, to dominate, to consume. You find yourself in relationships where your needs are perpetually secondary, your desires an afterthought. You become an emotional support system, a mirror reflecting back what your partner wants to see, a blank canvas on which they can paint their own reality. This isn't love, it is erasure. You perform the act of connection without ever feeling truly seen because you have long since hidden the person who is there to be seen. You give away pieces of your sovereignty in 1,000 tiny concessions until one day you realize your entire kingdom is ruled by another. Neurologically, you are actively wiring your brain for this servitude. Each time you suppress an authentic impulse in favor of a safer, more compliant action, you reinforce that neural pathway. Your brain, in its relentless pursuit of efficiency, learns that the path of least resistance, the path of conformity, is the default. It becomes an automatic, unconscious habit. This is why breaking free feels so difficult. You are not just fighting a mindset, you are fighting the very architecture of your mind, which you yourself have helped to build. Cognitive biases act as the sentinels of this prison. The status quo bias makes the familiar comfort of your cage seem preferable to the terrifying uncertainty of freedom. Confirmation. Bias causes you to seek out and remember evidence that justifies your conformity, while conveniently ignoring the stories of those who thrived by breaking the mold. Your mind becomes your own warden, expertly rationalizing your imprisonment. Zoom out, and you see this personal tragedy replicated on a mass scale, creating a culture of profound inauthenticity. It creates companies filled with employees who quietly resent the work that consumes their lives. It creates art that is derivative and safe, designed for marketability rather than expression. It creates political systems where leaders become mouthpieces for polls, their convictions as flexible as public opinion. It creates a society of specters, each performing for the other, bound by a collective, unspoken agreement to never reveal the messy, complex, and powerful truth of who they are. This is the true horror of the unseen trap. The cost is not a single, definable loss. It is the loss of everything. It is the potential you never realized, the joy you never felt, the connection you never forged, the power you never claimed. It is the slow, agonizing death of the person you were meant to be. You have been living life on terms dictated by the ghosts of your evolutionary past and the demands of a social order that prioritizes compliance over individual greatness. But there comes a point when the quiet agony of the cage becomes louder than the fear of the unknown wilderness outside. There comes a moment when the pain of staying the same is finally, undeniably greater than the perceived pain of change. This is the breaking point. It is the seed of all revolution, both internal and external. When you stand in the ruins of a life that is not yours, when you can no longer bear the weight of your own mask, a new question arises, not from the mind, but from the soul. How does the rebellion begin? The rebellion does not begin with a roar. It does not start with a grand, theatrical gesture of defiance. It begins in the absolute silence of your own mind with a single, treasonous thought. What if the parts of myself I have been taught to hate are the very source of my power? This is the radical shift in perspective that ignites everything. The escape from the cage is not about destroying the cage. It is about realizing you hold the key and that the key is forged from the very material you have been taught to discard. You must begin by completely reevaluating your relationship with your own darkness. The shadow, that repository of your repressed ambition, aggression, and self-interest, is not your enemy. It is a wellspring of raw, undiluted energy. Your entire life, you have been engaged in a futile and exhausting civil war against the most potent parts of your own nature. The rebellion starts when you declare a truce. You do not surrender to the shadow, allowing it to run rampant in a fit of chaotic indulgence. No, you do something far more radical. You begin to listen to it. You treat it not as a monster to be slain, but as an exiled strategist who holds the intelligence vital to your liberation. This is the true Machiavellian insight, stripped of its cartoonish villainy. Niccolò Machiavelli's genius was not in advocating for cruelty, but in his unflinching realism. He dared to describe the world as it is, not as we wish it were. He understood that the rules of power are different from the rules of piety. To navigate reality effectively, you must understand human nature in its totality, its light and its shadow. The same is true for your inner world. To achieve self-mastery, you must stop operating on the naive belief that you are only your good qualities. Your anger is not a sin. It is a compass pointing directly to a boundary that has been violated. Your ambition is not selfish. It is the voice of your potential screaming to be unleashed. Your desire for control is not evil. It is an instinct to impose order on the chaos of your life and sculpt your own destiny. To deny these forces is to deny your own engine. The first counterintuitive solution, then, is to integrate the shadow. You bring it into the light of your consciousness. You study it. You ask it questions. When you feel a surge of envy, you do not shame yourself. You ask, what does that person have that I secretly desire for myself? The envy becomes data. When you feel resentment, you ask, where am I failing to advocate for my own needs? The resentment becomes a call to action. You begin to harness the immense energy you once wasted on suppression and channel it with conscious, strategic intent. You learn that a person who has integrated their aggression is not a violent brute. They are a person with unshakable boundaries. A person who has integrated their ambition is not a ruthless tyrant. They are a focused and effective creator. The second radical act of rebellion involves your persona, the mask. A naive rebel would say, tear off the mask. Be brutally honest at all times. This is a recipe for self-destruction. The world is not ready for your unvarnished truth, and to offer it carelessly is to make yourself a target. The masterful rebel understands that the persona is not a prison, but a tool. You were once a slave to the mask, believing it was your face. Now, you become its master. You learn to wear it consciously, strategically. It becomes a form of armor that protects your vulnerable, authentic core while you navigate the often treacherous social landscape. You present a calm, agreeable face to a hostile superior, not because you are weak, but because it is strategically advantageous. You save your energy for the battles that matter. You no longer confuse social performance with self-worth. You are the puppeteer, not the puppet. This gives you an incredible sense of power and freedom. You can move through the world, fulfilling its superficial demands, while your true self remains intact, protected, and focused on its own mission. This leads to the ultimate act of breaking free, shifting your center of gravity from external validation to an internal locus of control. The herd keeps you tethered by making you an addict for its approval. The rebellion is a detox. You must consciously and deliberately begin to wean yourself off the need for applause. This is done by cultivating a new source of validation, your own internal code of conduct, your own definition of success, your own principles. You find power not in being liked, but in being a person you yourself respect. You trade the fleeting high of a compliment for the unshakable strength of self-trust. Each time you make a choice that is aligned with your own values, even if it goes unnoticed or is disapproved of by others, you cast a vote for your own sovereignty. This is not an overnight transformation. It is a quiet, deliberate campaign. It starts with ruthless self-observation, watching yourself perform, lie, and shrink, not with judgment, but with the cold, curious eye of a strategist. It proceeds by defining what truly matters to you, your non-negotiable hills to die on. And it is won through a series of small, calculated acts of courage, stating a mild, dissenting opinion, saying no without an elaborate excuse, dedicating 1 hour to a project that is purely for you. Each act is a small crack in the prison wall. Each one rewires your brain, weakening the pathways of conformity and strengthening the new pathways of authentic power. You are no longer a victim of your conditioning. You are an insurgent, waging a guerrilla war for the territory of your own soul. And as the walls of that old prison begin to crumble, you start to see the outline of something vast and profound on the horizon, the ultimate truth of what it means to be truly free. As you master the art of rebellion, harnessing your shadow, wielding your persona as a tool, and anchoring yourself to an internal compass, the world begins to change. The noise of external judgment fades into a distant hum. The fear of disapproval loses its venomous grip. You begin to feel a solidity within you, an unshakable core you mistake for the prize you have been seeking. You believe you have finally fought your way back to that lost, authentic self. You believe the war is over. But this is where the final, most profound revelation awaits. As you stand in the newfound silence of your own mind, you reach out to grasp this true self you have worked so hard to liberate, and your hand passes right through it. It is not there. The ultimate truth is this: there is no static, essential self to be found. It was never there. The quest was never about uncovering a pre-existing identity buried beneath layers of social conditioning. That was merely the first illusion to be shattered. The gnawing dissonance you felt was not the pain of a suppressed self, but the agony of an uncreated one. You were a sculptor who had been convinced to leave the marble untouched, letting the wind and rain of others' opinions carve it into a crude, unrecognizable shape. This realization reframes everything. The entire struggle was not a war of restoration, but a war for the right to create. Your persona and your shadow are not a false mask and a true face. They are the raw materials. They are the light and dark pigments, the smooth and rough textures from which a masterpiece can be made. The herd morality you fought against was not just a system of control. It was an anesthetic, a drug to numb you to the terrifying, glorious responsibility of staring at your own blank canvas. The rebellion was not just about breaking chains. It was about seizing the tools. The Machiavellian strategies of self-awareness and social navigation were never meant for mere survival. They are the artist's finest brushes, the sculptor's sharpest chisels, required to execute a deliberate and conscious design. You are not a thing to be found. You are a process to be enacted. You are not a noun. You are a verb. This is the freedom that lies beyond freedom. To be truly free is to understand that at every moment you are choosing what you will become. Your identity is not a historical fact, but a present tense decision. Your past mistakes, your traumas, your weaknesses, they are not your permanent identity. They are simply marks on the marble, veins in the stone that a skilled artist can either carve away or integrate into a more complex and beautiful design. There is no more hiding behind the excuse of, "This is just who I am." That sentence becomes a declaration of surrender. The real question is, given the material I have, who will I choose to forge? This power is terrifying because it is absolute. It strips you of every victimhood narrative, every excuse, every comfort of a predefined existence. The responsibility is immense, a weight that can crush those who are not ready for it. But within that weight lies the ultimate power, not the power to control others, but the power to author your own being. It is the power to look at your fear and decide to sculpt courage. It is the power to look at your resentment and decide to forge purpose. It is the power to continuously die to the person you were a moment ago and be reborn as the person you will yourself to be next. So now, the journey ends, and it begins. The critics have been banished from your workshop. The noise has ceased. The tools, once mysterious and forbidden, now feel familiar in your hands. Before you stands the raw, unformed substance of your own potential. It is a moment of pure, silent creation. All the battles you fought were for this: to arrive at this precipice of infinite possibility, alone and utterly responsible. The world may never understand the art you are about to create, It may not applaud. It may not even notice. But that no longer matters. The validation is not in the gallery, but in the act of creation itself. The visceral, soul-shaking feeling of will made manifest. The marble is before you. The chisel is in your hand. The silence is waiting. What will you create?